big stories today have everybody talking. We'll get to the Rob Ford debacle in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking to the reporter who broke that story wide open today. But first, the pipeline deal between BC and Alberta. For months now, Premier Clark has been steadfast about her 5 conditions having to be met before Alberta got any kind of go-ahead. Turns out the sticking point was condition number 5. And no surprise, it was about money. Here's what the Premier was saying today.
Alberta has reached a broader understanding and acceptance of British Columbia's 5 conditions, and our province has agreed to join the Canadian energy strategy discussions started by Premier Redford. We have made it clear to Alberta that their royalties and taxes are not part of the discussion, and I very much look forward to continuing our discussions with Province of Alberta and Premier Redford to grow our economies and strengthen the economy of Canada.
Joining us now, NDP environment critic Spencer Chandra. Herbert, thanks for being here tonight.
Glad to be with you here, Jill.
In your opinion, will Northern Gateway grow the economy of Canada, as Premier Clark was saying?
I think what we know about Northern Gateway, and the BC government used to have this vision and this belief, was that the Enbridge pipeline will be bad for our economy and will put our environment and our coast at risk. What we saw today was really, I think, the Premier preparing to flip-flop and say, okay, Enbridge, maybe you can go ahead if we get enough money. It's a big concern for British Columbians. Certainly before the election, the Premier was quite vocal as standing up and pointing out that we can't even respond to oil spills if they happen today. We don't have the capacity to respond to even a moderate oil spill, let alone a massive increase in oil exports in the north. You know, the government study showed that they, in some cases, could only collect 3% of the oil, leaving 97% to pollute the environment.
Is that your biggest concern then, an oil spill?
I think that's most people's biggest concern, oil spills, whether they be on land or in the water. But I think there's also concern about climate change, massively increasing the oil sands or tar sands, whichever you want to call them, exports and production will increase Canada's greenhouse gases. We don't have a plan to lower them, but we do know, and the science shows, that unless we start lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to cost our economy, our future, and our environment in a horrific way.
You know, it's interesting to me, Spencer, that a lot of people will agree to the fact that climate change is happening. There are obviously still some naysayers, and yet at the same time, they still want to mine the resources like natural gas, like oil in the ground. Although, you know, how do you say no to a $40 billion infusion into the economy?
Well, you know, I think that the question here is many small businesses in the north have been opposed to the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline because for them, one spill would wipe out their local economy. So we've got to look at it piece by piece here. I think the broader question you've asked is, you know, how do we shift our economy so that we're not just reliant on polluting the atmosphere through raw natural resources? And it's a good one. It's not an easy answer. But I think we've got to start by investing in renewable energy, by doing energy retrofits for homes and businesses, by focusing on clean technology, public transit, and those kinds of things that bring down our global climate change emissions rather than rapidly increasing them. Because you could make money today, sure, by burning things and polluting the environment, but if the cost tomorrow is way higher than today, why would we do that? Why would we leave a climate change disaster for our children and our grandchildren?
Well, there certainly doesn't seem to be a lot of concern on some people's parts about what's happening 50 and 100 years from now. They seem to be very focused on what we're doing today with the natural resources we have. But let's just talk about pipelines versus train or trucks for oils. Isn't this better than millions of Isn't this better than millions of gallons of oil being shipped across BC by train?
Well, you know, I think that's the challenge we've got is train or pipeline. They both involve oil tankers and risk to the coast through a major oil spill. In the north coast, particularly up near Rupert and Kitimat, we know those channels are very difficult to transport massive ships through. We also know that just one mistake, as we saw in the Queen of the North ferry, could lead to a major impact and a major problem. So I think train or pipeline, they both have their problems, they both have their benefits, but I think by and large British Columbians are concerned about safety altogether, not just is one better than the other. Maybe one's safer, maybe one's less safe, but still the issue of massive spills is a real one.
But even though the Premier was all smiles today when she was talking about her 5 conditions being met, in actuality we're still a long way from this project getting the green light, are we not?
Well, you know, we can't respond to major or even moderate oil spills today. So to think that the Premier could then turn around and approve a project if we got enough money, I think is wrong. Who knows? You know, the federal government in the end is the one that can decide whether Enbridge Northern Gateway goes ahead or not. So Stephen Harper and his cabinet could just say it's happening. And unfortunately, the Liberal government signed away our rights to have a say as a province on this. So who knows? We'll find out this December. But you know, certainly looks like the Premier's preparing to say yes by being positive about things, even though fundamentally the issue hasn't changed.
All right.
Respond to oil spills, and constitutionally the First Nations as well have huge opposition here.
NDP environment critic Spencer Chandra Herbert, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And for more discussion on this, joining us in studio is Owen Madden of the Wilderness Committee. Owen, thanks for dropping by tonight.
Hi, Jill.
The signing of this deal, and it's just a framework, but basically Alberta has agreed to BC's 5 conditions. In your opinion, does this signal that the Northern Gateway pipeline will happen?
There's a little bit of a pantomime unfolding here. You know, we've got this whole storyline, you know, are the Premiers getting on well? Are we getting enough money out of this proposal? It's dragging us off the main questions we should be asking about the proposal overall, which is, you know, majority of British Columbians do not want bitumen pipelines in BC. We can't lose sight of that and get dragged away into the sort of dramatic unfolding of a relationship on TV. To me, it's a purposeful distraction for everyone to bring us away from that massive opposition.
So are you saying that they staged this? They staged some disagreement and made a big deal about coming together on this?
Well, to me, the media is being fed this sort of a drama that's dragging us away from the real issues here. Okay, we've got massive opposition by First Nations. We've got a majority of British Columbians saying no to this proposal. We're supposed to be climate leaders, but yet we're building all this fossil fuel infrastructure. They're not the messages that are coming out in the media. What's coming out is this dramatic, well, a bit of a joke, really. It's a drama which distracts, in my opinion, and it helps to get the proposals through without getting the real issues discussed.
All right, well, let's talk about the real issues. And you know what, we did pull a clip of Premier Clark from last summer when she seemed to be quite adamant about this, you know, not going ahead. So have a listen to what she said back then.
It's not about British Columbia getting its fair share and the environmental concerns not being met. The environmental concerns absolutely must be met, and there are 3 of the 5 conditions that relate to the environment. No matter how much money the federal government, the private sector, Alberta were to put on the table, it would not make up for the fact that they didn't meet the environmental conditions.
So she's talking a good game there about environmental conditions, but what the discussion today was about was that the sticking point for Alberta was money. And, you know, and Christy Clark in that clip from last June mentioned how much money Alberta put on the table. Well, guess what? Alberta's not putting any money on the table for us.
Well, the opposition was never about money. People do not want bitumen pipelines in BC because of climate change, because of the risk of an oil spill. To make it about money is a wonderful distraction. That's my point, is that it reduces the discussion of the realities of the situation. I mean, to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure like this, when a majority, more than half of the new energy projects in the United States are coming from renewable energies, it's moving in the wrong direction. Now, if we're all talking about the price of this proposal or the relationship between the 2 premiers, we're not talking about that very, very important issue.
All right. Coastal First Nations also weighed in on this today. In fact, we heard from a lot of people, not a lot of people offering up support for this. Interestingly, there were no tweets from the Vancouver mayor or from Tradewinds. Art Starrett from Coastal First Nations. We spent the last decade building a conservation-based economy. The proposed pipeline would bring as many as 220 supersized oil tankers into BC's sensitive coastal waters every year. It could damage or destroy the cultural, ecological, and economic values the region offers. It's a big step back from the hard work done to manage and safeguard this global treasure, which is what you have been pointing out, Owen Madden, talking here tonight. What kind of say are First Nations going to have in all this? We hear a lot of politicians saying the environment, and we want to hear from First Nations, and they get to have their say. My sense is they're not really being heard.
Well, if you look at the 5 conditions, the condition relating to First Nations involvement is saying that they get an income from this. Now, the opposition is not based on income. They do not want bitumen pipelines in BC, nor do the majority of British Columbians. So it's a big effort to make it about money. It never was about money. It's a slippery slope that we're finding ourselves in, and it's been described as a flip-flop. It certainly is an inconsistent message we're getting from the BC government right now, but we need clarity. This is a really, really important issue. We've got our climate change fears in relation to these proposals. We've got an enormous oil spill risk. So we need clarity now.
What can British Columbians do? I would imagine a lot of people who are anti-pipeline, and you're suggesting the majority of British Columbians are. I'm sure the numbers would be hotly debated by the Premier and her staff and her government. What can British Columbians do? Because I would suspect that if you're sitting there tonight and you don't like this concept, this idea, you're feeling like you're about to get steamrolled.
Well, there's a National Energy Board hearings coming up in relation to one pipeline, which is the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So they can get involved in that potentially as interveners. There is a push on board from our organisation to try and bring back that power to make decisions like this back to the province. So we should have another environmental assessment on all of this in the province. As the environment critic said, that was signed away back in 2010. So we need to bring that back. There's a lot people can do. I'd advise them to check out organisations like the Wilderness Committee. We are looking for people to get involved in the National Energy Board hearings and make their views clear.
All right. Owen Madden, Wilderness Committee, thanks for being here.
Thank you.